In view of the aforementioned resolutions, we call upon the Kenya Union of Clinical Officers to call off the ongoing strike to ensure service delivery in county facilities and in all facilities do not grind to a halt. We had a meeting last week where we discussed the major issues. We have set a technical committee between the COG and the clinical officers, the council, and we gave them 21 days to actually go over, the issues and to have a draft CBA that then will be cascaded to the counties, so that we can adopt them as governors and as different employers across the country. We had agreed on the Social Health Authority, but there was a little miscommunication. Then they thought that we've moved back on our word, and that's why today, even this statement, I am signing in front of you, and the PS is going to sign as well in front of you, so that you can show our clinical officers that we care and that we mean our word. The authority shall henceforth pay SHA benefits to the said licensed facilities and practitioners by the Clinical Officers Council. The Clinical Officers Council is the body that registers clinical officers and regulates them. Earlier, the position had been that clinical officers and all other cadres go through the KMPDC, which is the Medical Practitioners and Dentists Council. But we have agreed that every cadre will go through the regulatory body, and that was the biggest issue. Social Health Authority shall empanel and contract facilities and practitioners pursuant to Section 33(2), as read with Section 31(3) of the Social Health Insurance Act and Regulations, meaning that clinical officers will be directly empaneled through the registered regulatory body and not through any other regulatory body. In terms of policy position, you've had the PS, we have the CEO of Social Health Authority. We recognize clinical officers as clinical officers. They will be registered. You can't tell the churches to be registered and an imam. Imams will be registered by NCCK. Clinical officers will be registered by the Clinical Officers Council. Doctors are registered by the Kenya Medical Practitioners and Dentists Council, as per the KMPDC Act. Nurses by the Nursing Council of Kenya are the ones that register them. So it's just step by step.
I think there's been a miscommunication between us and them. The resolutions that were reached on the 14th reached the ministry today morning. We had already started implementing those resolutions, but we were notified that the clinical officers are on strike, and that's why we had to come back here so that we agree, and we were affirming that this will be implemented. We want to confirm that indeed these resolutions will be implemented with immediate effect, and starting this afternoon, we are going to call on the Council of Clinical Officers to report to the Ministry of Headquarters through their chief officer so that we can start engaging with the DHA.
There is no doctor who should pre-authorize for a clinic officer. Let them be responsible for the action that they do. And that will streamline the services so that everybody can be responsible. We do not want to go back to what we had in NHIF, where facilities had claims using other people's licenses because we didn't have a system that was working. I'm happy that the Digital Health Authority is here, and they have promised that we'll be able to provide a network or a system that is going to be connected to all clinic officers who will be given the empanelment, so that we have one communication through the digital highway that is visible to everyone who is in the system, so that we do not have any gray areas and hidden corners. Because when you tell clinic officers you cannot pre-authorize them, or you don't give them authority to be able to treat and be paid, they had to use the registration of KMPDC, who are doctors, and to me that is fraud. Because if a clinic officer is using a license of a doctor, and then it's not the doctors who are treating, then it means that that doctor is the one who is responsible for anything that will happen. And that is why it is important to give them the rights directly, because they are the ones who are offering those specialized services in the level 2s, the level 3s, and sometimes level 4, because there is no level of facility in Kenya that you cannot find a clinic officer. And that is to mean everyone to carry their own cross. There will be a meeting this afternoon between the Clinical Officers Council, which is a body equivalent to KMPDC, and we start the journey on how we can be able to empanel the clinical officers. It's not a plug and play. It will be an effort in futility to tell them they will start treating or being given rights authorization today when the systems are being put in place. That is why we are saying it may take maybe a few days. It is not necessarily 2 weeks. It could be a week. But once this process kicks off, which is this afternoon, then there's no reason why they shouldn't go back to work, because what they have asked for is already in the pipeline, and they are involved in implementation to be able to achieve what they wanted. And therefore, the fact that it's starting today in the afternoon and they will be involved is already an evidence that what we have promised them is already being done. Last week, actually, we met on 14th. We never had any media brief, but we had a very comprehensive meeting with the KUKO. And as far as we were concerned, there was not going to be any strike until they misunderstood what was communicated by the SHA CEO, which they never got and never asked questions on what exactly does it mean. Does it negate what we discussed that day? So I would say this trigger for the strike today was simply because of wrong perception or misunderstanding over communication. It is possible for clinical officers to be given the pre-authorization and also to be empaneled and contracted to be able to offer services. For SHA to succeed, and also the universal health coverage in Kenya, we must cover all facilities in the country. It is common knowledge that levels 2s and 3s, where the majority of Kenyans normally start their journey to healing, is usually manned by clinical officers and nurses. And therefore, to leave clinical officers from the list or of authorized personnel to be able to pre-authorize the activities or rather the treatment that should be done to the patients, it is to mean that we start treatment at level 4. And that is why we are happy that SHA and the ministry are here, and we have agreed in principle, both Council of Governors, who represents over 95% of facilities in Kenya, that we will enable these clinical officers to be able to access the services directly. For that reason, therefore, there is no reason why clinical officers cannot go back to work.